Turning now to the union protests and sickouts breaking out all over the country as big labor whines about proposed cutbacks to bloated budgets. The irony is that overpaid, overbended unions are bulging state and local and federal budgets. Take Michigan, for example. The state is broke. Detroit is broke. So when newly elected Governor Rick Snyder suggested budget cuts to avoid a first major American city bankruptcy in decades, the unions went wild and took to the streets. The keynote speaker from yesterday's Michigan protest was the mayor of Lansing, Michigan, Virg Bernero. He joins us now. Virg, thanks for joining us. So is it so darn important to protect the wages and benefits of the union members that you're willing to bury a state, bury a city, throw Detroit possibly into a bankruptcy? Why won't you negotiate? Why won't the unions negotiate with the governor?
Well, Eric, of course they'll negotiate. And the issue is, that's one of the issues, is collective bargaining. Are we going to have top-down, where orders are dictated from state government like a monarch, or are we going to have collective bargaining, where the people have a right to bargain, which I think they do in this country. And I'm happy to live in a country where people can collectively bargain and where they can also protest, where they can petition the government for redress of grievances. So I'm proud to stand with union brothers and sisters and working people everywhere. And by the way, Eric, we talked about this before. You know, when organized labor does well, all working people, they raise wages for everybody. You know, those benefits and pension that some people enjoy, they didn't just come out of a genie's bottle. They came because of collective bargaining and the rights that labor won.
Mayor Virg, or when organized labor demands such a high salary that it's so far above the free market wage and benefits that in times, Virg, you know this, federal workers all in make double what the private sector makes. They make 4 times the benefits and almost double the salary, the wages of the private sector.
That's not true at all.
Unsustainable.
That's not true at all. I don't want your viewers to believe that. The fact is, when you compare apples to oranges, it is about equal, or the private sector does much better. The fact is, if you look at what a doctor working for the government makes, or a psychiatrist or psychologist compared to in the private sector, they make more. When you compare apples to apples, in fact, it is a decent comparison. And what's wrong with a little security? What's wrong with a little health care? Should people have to be forced into poverty?
You're misleading the public right now. The number is almost double. An average federal worker, an average Fed makes $123,000 all in. An average private sector worker makes $61,000, and they make 4 times the benefits. But allow me. But what that means is that puts the burden on. Forget small businesses for a second, because we'll talk about public sector unions. It puts the burden on states, municipalities, yourself, Virg. Lansing. How's Lansing doing?
Well, Lansing is struggling. Of course, Michigan is struggling because of the manufacturing that your buddies on Wall Street sent overseas. You know, it's a funny thing. You want to blame the unions. The fact of the matter is, and we've discussed this, and you can check it out. Google this. The fact is that when the unions were at their strongest in the 50s and 60s, everybody else was doing better as well. The fact is, when that union wage went up, it raised everybody else's wages.
Google this,
coincidentally, that was when America was making things. We were making things. That was before your buddies shipped everything to China. That's the problem.
Google Lansing, Michigan, and let's find out what you have to do in your own town, because you have wages and benefits exceeding the revenues. You're going to have to cut people. You're going to have to cut people or lay them off. Is that right?
We're considering that. We're also considering increasing the millage rate. The fact of the matter is, we are suffering as a state, and I'm trying to provide vital services. So yes, we're suffering. We're also suffering from the loss of manufacturing, the hemorrhaging of manufacturing jobs. You know, when those jobs were here, these companies were making money. These companies were profitable. They went overseas because they could make more and because they lack patriotism. They didn't go there, and because they don't want to pay a decent living wage. Of course, in China, they can pay people dirt and pollute the environment. Why not go to China and India?
Blame all that.
How are we going to compete with that?
By the way, Virg, are there unions in China?
I'm sure not. Maybe
of course, and that's why labor is going over to China, because they don't have to pay exorbitant labor rates.
And is that what you recommend? Are you endorsing the kind of authoritarian government and the lack of free speech? They also go there for that, and they also have children working. Child labor, slave labor. Give me a break. Is that where we're headed? Maybe that's why people are in the streets, because we don't want to become China. We don't want to become India. Now, India is a democracy. People are. There's a little more freedom there. But the fact is, there's a huge disparity between rich and poor, and that's where we're headed. The unions created the middle class in this country.
Disparity between people who work for the government and people who work for the private sector. The problem is when people who work for the government are paid double what the private sector is paid. It's unsustainable.
That is absolutely
and things
fallacious.
like Lansing, Michigan happen where you're going to have to lay off people or make some cuts.
That is absolutely false. That study is not apples to apples. And the fact is, you talk about this big deficit. You talk about the fact that the states are broke. The reason the federal government is broke in part is because you did away with the inheritance tax. You extended the Bush tax credits. We're tired of the trickle down. We're tired of the trickle down. That's what people were protesting. We'd like to see bottom up. How about you take care of the grassroots? You take care of the people here and let the growth happen from the bottom up instead of hoping that something, if we let people get rich enough, richer and richer, eventually some of it might trickle down. We're tired of being trickled down. That's what we said yesterday.
Virg, the bloated benefits and salary packages that you're offering state, local, and federal employees, or they're going to drive the state or the municipality into bankruptcy.
Yeah,
By the way, it may not be a bad thing because guess what happens in state bankruptcy or city bankruptcy? You can renegotiate with the unions.
Yeah, you can treat the unions like they do in China. Look, I know what you're trying to do, which is divide and conquer. Let the working people go at each other, when in fact it's the unholy alliance of Washington and Wall Street that has sold out Main Street all these years. That's what we're suffering from, these free trade policies. And how come we have all this money? We can go into Iraq, we can go into Afghanistan and fix those communities. How about we spend a little money domestically? Why don't you cut those programs and let's spend it here?
We spent a lot of money already bailing out states across the country. We have to leave it there. My good friend Virg, we'll see you again very, very soon.
Good to see you. Thank you.